Today, our topic that we're going to be talking about is writers, mentor texts, and checklists, and how you can use those in order to fuel your small group. So, our plan for today is that I'm actually planning less than what I normally do. So, we might actually finish a little bit early today, but I don't want to get your hopes up too much. But we're going to start with talking about data informed small groups. And then we're going to go into the digital writers toolkits, which some of you are already very familiar with that tool. Some of you might know about it, but haven't actually used it. So I thought we could take a little moment to just look at it. Then I'm going to talk about the structure of a mentor text small group. This isn't like an official TC small group. It's sort of like my kind of modification of stuff that they do, but it's very similar in its structure. And then we will have a little bit of time in a breakout room for you guys to analyze the tools. Then we're going to watch 2 sample videos. And I hope that you guys don't get bored during those because they are 2 full small groups. One is in an upper grade and one is in a lower grade. So you can see sort of what this looks like. And then we will have our feedback, our closure, and our survey time. At the end, because I am planning on ending a little bit early, at the end, I'm going to offer for anybody who wants to stay and learn about the digital thin slicing, which we'll talk about in a little bit, then you can choose to stay at that time. But it's not necessary. If you would like at the end of the feedback time, then you can check out. All right, so our data informed small groups. So when we're talking about our data informed small groups, it's a little bit trickier right now when we're in the distance learning. And so although there is a very specific structured way that normally I would present to, and which you guys are very familiar with, which is called thin slicing. And normally that is the way that I would push, but I also realize that right now in distance learning, any sort of gathered data that you can get to inform your small groups is going to be beneficial. And by data informed, that could be as simple as you're going through your students' writings and just identifying like 4 kids that all sort of have the same need. They all need to work on the beginning of their stories, or they all need to work on using text evidence, or they all need to work on fill in the blank. So this can be done a little bit more formally through thin slicing, or this can be done sort of informally, where you're looking through their writings and just kind of forming groups. Now, with the digital thin slicing, like I mentioned before, we're going to save that for the end because I really want to focus on the small groups, and I don't want people that maybe aren't quite as techie to get overwhelmed with this piece. So that's why I'd rather push it to the end, and then we can anybody who would like to stay can. But the general idea of the digital thin slicing, I mean, it's the same as the regular thin slicing. You're just quickly going through your students' work and identifying what are common needs amongst the students. Now, the important question is not how assessment is defined, but whether assessment information is used. So whether you're doing a formal thin slicing or whether you're just doing, informal, quick on a sticky note, jotting some names down, at the end of the day, the assessment or the gathering of the data is only useful if then after that you actually use it, right? You actually have that small group. And that's the tricky part right now. And I know that many of you guys that are joining today, I can bet right now are thinking, I'm joining this PD because there weren't other options on the PD calendar, but realistically, I do not have time for writing small groups. I know you're probably thinking that, and I'm okay with that. But even if, in this distance learning environment, it's tricky, this can always be something that you learn about. And when we're back in the classroom, it's very easy and consistent, and it's very low prep to do in the classroom. As well as through distance learning. Okay, so we know that we want to gather the data in some shape or form. We know that we want to use that data to decide who our groups are going to be, who are those common needs. So, what's next? So, the next piece is the actual tools. Now, the tools that we're going to be using for these groups, it's actually that picture that I put there, I would change that. That's kind of the adult version of the checklist. I prefer the kid version that has the little illustration, so I should have changed that. But the two tools that we're going to be using are the checklist and the mentor text. Now, possibly you're familiar with these mentor texts. They refer to them as annotated mentor texts or annotated texts in the Heinemann resources. But this is my like favorite tool, the most powerful tool that you can find in writing for me are these mentor texts. And the reason why is because they match up perfectly with the checklist. So anything that you see in the checklist, you will be able to find an example for in the annotated mentor text. And these exist for kinder all the way to 8th grade. So you have the full spectrum. They exist for narrative, they exist for informative, and they exist for opinion or argumentative. Now, one of the trickiest parts for me teaching writing small groups, is that like I would just admittedly say that was by far my weakest area when I was in the classroom prior to figuring out this way of teaching the small groups. And the reason why is because like I consider myself to be a fairly good writer. I can be a little wordy at times, but it sort of comes naturally because I was a reader growing up. And it is so hard when you have in your mind like exactly how it could go and you're like trying to figure out how to get it in their mind, right? And a lot of times, maybe I'm the only one that does this, but what was happening those first couple years of teaching was I would be like, maybe you could try something like this. And then I would tell them, right? I would tell them what to write. Or like if I was really feeling shameless, I would actually grab their pencil and like write in the margin for them. Well, we all know that that's not going to teach them to write, right? That's not going to create better writers. That's going to create writers that are dependent on teachers to help them. When I found this tool of the mentor text, it sort of changed the ball game for me because what it did was it enabled me to say, okay, here's what we want to try here. Like what if we started this story with dialogue? Do you want to see an example of that? Check this example out. And because the example is in a different context from what they're writing, they're not just copying it word for word. What they're doing is they're borrowing the idea, they're borrowing the strategy. So they see in this mentor text like this way that this author structured this text, and they're able to say like, oh, I could try something like that. But then they're having to do the cognitive work of transferring that to what they're writing about. And with these annotated mentor texts, it's really neat. This is another one of my like just favorite parts about these texts is that it's the exact same text for every grade level. It's the same story. So the kinder story, the first grade story, the second grade story, it's the same exact story, but as the grades go up, the text becomes more mature. The strategies that are being used, like the kinder one is literally I think like 5 or 6 lines, but the 6th grade, you can see here a picture of the 6th grade one. You can see that it's a little bit it's more detailed. So what's great about that is that if you have students that are writing at different grade levels, like let's say when I was a 6th grade teacher at Nikolov, I had multiple students that were reading below a 3rd grade level. Below a 3rd grade level. Almost half my class was reading at a primary level. That is hard to meet the needs for. When I had students ranging from a level C to a level Z. And I can't hand over a 6th grade mentor text to a student that's reading at a 2nd grade level, because that's not going to help them. They can't access that. But when I hand them over the same type of story, but at their level, they're able to do that work at a level that they can access. Does that make sense? So it's like it's already set up for me to differentiate and to provide those scaffolds for students where they're at. Okay, so now the question is, how do we get the kids to use them? Well, this is a picture of my classroom when I was there, when I was teaching at Nikolov. And this was the way I did it within my classroom. I had a bulletin board that had writing checklists for different grade levels. I know some people are not a fan of like the 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. We just spent a lot of time building community to where we didn't look at the grades as something bad, but you're welcome to look at it like 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, 5, however you want to do it, or color coding. You could easily like white out before you make the copies. You could white out the grade level, however you want to do it. And what I had in this wall was access for the students to be able to get up themselves, not ask me, get up themselves when they needed a checklist or a mentor text, they would go and get it. And they would keep that with them, and they would bring that same mentor text back every single time I met with them during a unit. So that mentor text, that the work that you'll see today, it started off with just, a little bit. And by the end of the unit, these mentor texts would be all marked up. Now, obviously, in a distance learning environment, we don't have a bulletin board that we can hang stuff on. And so I guess it was like maybe like September or October, I can't remember when, I sent you guys out a link to this Padlet. And what these are writer toolkits that me and another coach from another state that we've been collaborating on. And I'll just go ahead and click on this. And you'll see that when you go into these toolkits, so let's look at, because I did a 5th grade one, we'll look at 5th grade. There are also some in Spanish. Not all of the Spanish ones are done, but there are some in Spanish. So I'm going to go into the argumentative toolkit. And you'll see that it opens up like this. This is key. I think a lot of teachers don't maybe know about this ability, but once you get here, sometimes you get a little stuck. Like, what do I do from here? You always want to click where it says open in new window. And this is the link. So when you go into the toolkit, you'll see that the kids can access the checklists. If they click on this, it will actually open the document for them. They can access different mentor texts. You'll see that the annotated mentor text is here. There's also some student mentor texts that could be used in a similar way to what I'm going to show you today. There's also rubrics and there's charts. The main thing I think I would probably be using with my kids is the mentor text and the checklist. I wasn't too big on the rubrics, but that was just me. The checklist for me felt kind of like a kid-friendly version of the rubrics. So this is a way that you could consistently make sure that the kids have access to these tools, because that's kind of the hardest part, is like, how do the kids access the tool? Now, if you are a primary teacher, you're not going to send this book out to them. Even though I did create this for primary, it really was more like to be a teacher tool, because I realized that the primary students probably aren't going to be able to access the toolkit in the same way. It's going to be a little bit more complicated. Okay, so let me go back. Now, this phrase that I put here, so teach students to be the captain of their own ship. I had this hanging, not teach students, but in my classroom, I had a big sign in front of my writing center that said, be the captain of your own ship. And what that phrase means is that if we are constantly telling kids what they need to change in their writing, then they are always going to be dependent on us. So if I am the red pen teacher that's writing notes in the margins of a student's paper, which by the way is so time consuming, like I never was good at that as a teacher. But in a way, I think it was good that I wasn't good at that, because while I think that feedback is valuable, we have to teach our students to be able to recognize and analyze and evaluate what they need to fix in their writing, because there's one of us and there's 24 to 31 of them. So when I say teach our students to be the captain of their own ship, what I'm saying is we have to teach them how to look at their writing and decide what they need to fix. And that is the hardest thing. But using this small group of mentor texts makes it work. I promise you, I used to do, the mini lessons. There's one every unit that's on the checklist, and the kids are supposed to analyze their work and go through the checklist. And I was like, that was the most stressful mini lesson for me every single unit. Because I always felt like it was a waste of time. It was just too hard to get the kids to do it and for it to be meaningful. But within the small group, it works because you're breaking it down in pieces. Okay, so now so let's go back to upper grades for a second. How do we make this sustainable? Like, how do we, I can share the link with the kids, but that doesn't mean they're going to use it, right? So how do we make it sustainable? So one option is you could put the link to the digital toolkit in your Google Classroom in a place where they can always go back to. Personally, I don't really think that although that's a good option, I don't think that's going to get them to use it. The second option, which is what I would do, is teach your students to bookmark the toolkit. Now, I want to show you guys something with the toolkit. So if I come into here, let me show you what happens. If the kids press the star, which is how we typically have taught kids to bookmark, right? And right now I'm talking Chromebooks. If the kids press the star, guess what happens when their bookmark bar looks like mine? It goes into these little arrows, and I call this the abyss, because many teachers and many students do not know that these two arrows exist. And I know some of you guys are like, yeah, I've been there in office hours where I learned about those arrows. And within these arrows lie all of those things that you bookmarked, all those things that you press the star for. But really, that's not as convenient as it being up here where I can easily and quickly access it. So here's what I would have the kids do. Instead of pressing the star, have them click on the URL once, and that makes it blue. And then you're going to drag it and drop it where they can see it. So now you can see it's at the top. It's like, okay, they're going to access that because they can see it. And the third and final way to make it sustainable is for you to access it often. So if you're going to show a mentor text, access it through the digital toolkit. Don't already have it ready. Go into the digital toolkit in order to show it, because you're teaching the kids the routine of okay, let's open up our digital toolkits, or you could also just have them bookmark the actual mentor text if you prefer. All right. So we teach kids to use the tools by focusing in on their specific need and asking the question, how can this tool help me to grow in this one area? And this is the important part, this one area. If you try to use the checklist and have the kids go through everything and analyze their writing and all that, for me, it was overwhelming for the kids and it was overwhelming for me. But if you take the checklist and focus on one part and dig into that one part so that you make sure that they understand it, it will be effective. So next, I'm just going to look and see how I'm doing on time. I'm right on time. So what we're going to talk about now is the actual structure of this small group that I keep talking about. So first, we know that there's a couple different types of small groups. There's guided practice, where you're working together on it. That is a little bit more supportive, you're giving a little bit more scaffolding. There's a demonstration, which is like completely on the teacher. I think we tend to do a lot of that in distance learning because it's logistically complicated to do other types of teaching, just with, kids' microphones and kids' videos and all of that, kids' internet. The explain an example. So this is very close to demonstration. And the fourth and final is inquiry. Inquiry is by far the most powerful of all the types of small groups or teaching in general that you could do. It's the hardest to do because it can get messy, basically, right? Because the kids are the ones that are doing, sort of driving the learning. Now, in the small group that I'm going to show you, it is an inquiry small group if I had kids sitting around a table with me. But with the distance learning environment, I'm doing a little bit more of that guiding because it's harder. It is harder to do it over a screen. So you'll see that typically this small group tends to be more student led. And that teaches them that independence so that it transfers to when they're doing it by themselves. But I do kind of facilitate a little more than I probably would in person. All right, so we're going to look at the small group. I'm going to go over the structure with you just so that you can get a feel for what it's going to be like. And then we will watch a small group that I did yesterday with Jennifer Safon's kids. And then we'll watch one with Katie Patton's students. Okay, so the connection starts with you're all here because I noticed that all of you could really work on, or I might be a little bit more encouraging because I noticed that all of you are really great at this. But I think that we could work on adding dialogue to our stories, something along those lines. Let's take a look at what our checklist tells us makes up a strong lead, or let's take a look at what our checklist says about elaborating in our text, or let's take a look at what our checklist fill in the blank. Then we would move into a teaching point, but of course it's informal, so it doesn't have to be quite this structured. This is just to give you an idea. Today, I want to teach you that a writer can use a mentor text to ask the question, what is this writer doing well that I can try in my own writing? That's the question that you keep going back to over and over and over again, like a broken record. What is this writer doing that I can try in my writing? What is this writer doing? I say it like 50 times in the small group. Inquiry. So now this is where the kids typically would do the work like sort of more independently. I mean, you're there facilitating, but you'll see in the video that I definitely have to guide this work more, especially because it's the first time I've done it with these kids in both groups. So students can dissect a focused part of the mentor text and annotate as they do this. And then you'll be coaching in. So what is the author doing there? What do we see? Where do we see this part of the checklist there? And then how the kids are going to practice. So then they are going to try on in their own writing. They're going to choose something from the mentor text that they're going to try in their writing. So they're going to choose a spot in their writing that needs that help, and then they're going to try it in their writing. And again, as they're doing this, you're coaching in, what did the author do here that you can try? And you'll see it in my video. And then the last thing is they're probably not going to finish in your small group time. I typically would have them finish it independently. And then the next time I pull them back, then we would look at it. Now, I didn't really do a ton of follow up. I'm not going to act like I was like on them with each part. But what I did do was I made sure that every time they came back to a small group, I should see those revision marks. And this is when it was in paper, of course. I should see those revision marks everywhere, all over their papers. And The other thing is that I would do, this is a little just trick. You can't really do this in distance learning, but I want to share it with you for when we're back in person, is I typically would have two groups going at once. So I would sort of stagger them. I would have a group at my kidney table and a group on the ground. And so while the group on the ground started working on their independent practice part, like where they're actually doing it to their writing, because that part takes a long time, I would jump to the other group and get them started on it. And that was just a way to be able to get to more of my kids. But again, I wouldn't try to do that in distance learning. That's too much. All right. So what I would like to do right now is I'm going to give you, I've been talking for a long time, so I want to give you guys some time to talk. I know you haven't seen the groups yet. We're going to do that in just a second. Before we do that, I want you to go into your breakout rooms, and I want you to be able to take a look at a sample. It's a 5th grade one, so I realize that it's not the exact right grade level for all of you guys. You're welcome, if you know, you're welcome to access the digital toolkits and look at your own grade level. But what I want you to do in this group is I want you to think about, just look at one area. So the small group that I'm going to be doing is on the lead. So you might want to look at the lead, and as a group, talk about, what does this checklist tell us that the student should do at this level? And then look at the actual first paragraph of the mentor text and think about, how does this mentor text model those skills? Like, so are the kids going to be able to find examples from what's in the checklist in the mentor text? So when you guys get into your rooms right now, it's going to be random. If one person could open up these documents, Edgardo, would you mind this line right here? Let's try this together. This is the link for the documents. Would you mind putting that link in the chat prior to putting everyone in breakout rooms?
Sure, I just opened it. I'm in the process of doing that right now.
Okay. So once you are in your breakout room, if one person can make sure that they have this document open before going to the breakout room, this folder open, there's 2 documents in there. And then if that one person can share their screen so that you guys can all look at the text, that would be great. So whenever you are ready, Edgardo, we are ready for breakout rooms. Here we are. Okay, so I think we are all back in here. So one thing that I wanted to mention just before we move on to actually watch the videos, is that I think a really good question that somebody asked in one of the groups is, for the younger grades, the annotated mentor texts aren't really very friendly, right? And I completely agree. And that's why you'll see this in my sample video, that what I did was I do it on my iPad because I don't have a printer, but you could easily just do this on paper and pencil. But what I did was I took that annotated mentor text and I made it look like, I just wrote it out and I drew some pictures. I made it look like what the kids are going to be doing. So if you look at like the kinder annotated mentor text, it's like lines, and the kids don't write like that. So you would grab a primary piece of paper, just like what the kids are using, and you would put it in the context of something that's going to be relatable to them. The other thing is that I know a lot of you guys are creating teacher texts when you're doing these units in primary, especially, right? Like you have your own version and you probably have more amazing drawings than mine. And that is okay too. As long as they have a mentor text, it doesn't have to be the annotated mentor text. The reason why I personally like the annotated mentor text, especially for upper grade, is because it takes a lot of effort to write a teacher text for upper grade, because they're long. It's not like writing a kinder text, right? You really have to think through it. And these are already fit to match up with the first video. Let me go ahead and reshare my screen. So the first video we're going to watch right now, and I do want to warn you that it is 2 small groups. Okay, so the first one, the older grade one, it is a little bit longer. It's like 15 minutes. So the groups do take around 15 minutes to do, 15 to 20 minutes to do. So just keep that in mind. And that's because of the piece where the kids are doing the writing, which is why I said like I typically would have 2 kind of staggered going at once. Okay, so here we go. Let's go ahead and start our videos. Okay, so the first one is a 5th grade group. I recorded this yesterday with Jennifer Safon's kids, and it's not perfect, so don't be too critical. The internet's popping in and out. The kids, like, you can't really hear them all the time. So pretty much what you experience. We started with a list of 5 kids. One didn't show up. No, sorry. One, she hadn't finished her writing in time. And then one didn't show up. And then one halfway through the small group decided she didn't want to hang out anymore. So she just disappeared. I was like, okay, so we're down to 2 kids. Well, this is pretty accurate to what teachers are experiencing right now. So you'll see we start with a certain number of kids and we end up with a certain number. So today I brought you guys all together because I know that you just finished writing your flash drafts, right? And so you're ready to start thinking about some of your revision work. And what I wanted to show you is how one really smart way that writers revise their work is that they look at a mentor text and their writing checklist in order to make their work a little bit better and to ask the question, what is this writer doing that I could try on in my work? Okay, so first we're going to take a look at our checklist. And I thought, and you guys, I'm going to pause here real quick. I use my iPad for all of this because I don't have an Elmo, but everything that you are seeing here can be done with an Elmo and just paper. Today, instead of looking at the whole checklist because it's really long, and since you guys just did your flash drafts, I thought it might be a good idea to just focus on one part of the checklist. And so I was thinking today we could focus on the lead. So I thought what we could do is read through it together and sort of just like highlight the important parts, the things where we think, I think that's going to be something important that I need to think about whether I'm doing. So I'm going to read it. I wrote an introduction that led to a claim or thesis and got my readers to care about my opinion. I got my readers to care by not only including a cool fact or jazzy question, but also figuring out what was significant in or around the topic and giving readers information about what was significant about the topic. I worked to find the precise words to state my claim. I let readers know the reasons I would develop later. So what are some of the things that our lead should have? And you guys can, anybody can answer out.
A hook.
Okay, a hook. So like right here where it says a cool fact or a jazzy question, that kind of sounds like a hook, right? Okay, what else? Ashley, give me one. Let's look right here. I sound a little bossy there. What does it say there that's important? Sorry, Ashley. That it has. Look at the very first sentence.
Well, it has claim.
A claim or a thesis, right? So claim or thesis, okay? What else? Let's look at the bottom section. Valentina, what do you see in this section right here?
Let the reader know what they're going to read throughout the text.
Okay, so the reasons. I want the readers to know the reasons I would develop later. What else? I worked to find the precise words to state my claim. And so what that means is like I worked to find the just right words. Like I didn't just do any words. I worked to give the right words. So, okay, so it looks like we have 4 main things that we're looking for. A hook, a claim or a thesis, precise words, and reasons. Are we all on the same page with that?
Mhm.
Yes? Okay. All right. So They're now so what we're going to excited. do, remember that as we're looking at this mentor text, we're always asking ourselves the question, Noted. what is this writer doing well that I can try on in my own writing? And notice that I not showing the boxes on the side. And I'm just going to remind ourselves real quick what they are. So we said we were looking for a hook, a thesis, precise words, and reasons. Right? Okay, so now we're going to look at this intro, this lead. And remember, the lead is only this first part because after that, we start into the reasons. So we're going to read through this and we're going to see if we can find the hook, the thesis, the precise words, and the reasons. Okay, so I think what I want to do is I'm going to use different color highlighters so that we can be really clear on which part of the lead is which part of the checklist. And
Okay,
with
we
my
ready?
kids, okay, here we go. Until with my kids, and when I was teaching 6th grade, I would have them highlight on their checklist the color that they were going to highlight on the mentor text, that part. Does that make sense? So like the 4 things on the checklist, they would have highlighted in the colors that they were going to highlight on the actual mentor text. Till 2 weeks ago, recess was really fun. But since the recess ladies said football was too dangerous and the school banned it, now kids just sit around on the grass. We're too old for the swings and there's nothing else to do. Football is not dangerous. It is great for kids. We should have football at recess because it's good exercise, because everyone can play, and because it will help us learn important things. All right. So what I want you guys to do is I want you to tell me, where do you see any of these 4 components that we saw in the checklist?
For the reason she says football is good exercise, everybody could play, and because it helps them learn important things.
Perfect. Okay, so those are her reasons. Oops, sorry, my pen isn't working very well. Okay, what else?
The hook is like, until 2 weeks ago it was fun, but since the recess ladies banned it, it isn't fun anymore.
So yeah, it's like, that's kind of interesting, right? It's kind of a quirky way of starting it off. It's like until 2 weeks ago, recess was really fun. It almost feels like she's starting off a narrative writing, but it's not. She's just getting you hooked in there. Okay, let's see, Ashley. So where do you see her doing either the thesis or or using precise words in her claim? A thesis is always made up of 2 things. It has a claim, so like what you think should happen, right? Your opinion, and it has your reasons. Where do you see a sentence that has the claim and the reasons together?
We should have football at recess.
Good job. So we should have football at recess. So that is your claim. And remember, the thesis is the claim and the reasons together. So this is all your thesis. Okay? Okay, so now last one, Valentina. Precise words. We haven't really seen the precise words yet. So let's look at that. Where do you think this author uses really precise words? In there.
In the pink one on the top,
Anywhere in this first paragraph.
it says football is not dangerous, and that's precise.
Okay.
And when the school banned it, now kids just sit on the grass.
Okay, so school banned it. Now kids just sit on the grass like, oh, it's so boring, right? Right? She's being very
Mm-hmm.
concise. I don't know
Okay.
if those were like
So
really
now
examples
here
of
comes
precise
the
words,
important
but so remember that what we're asking ourselves is, what is this writer doing well that I can try on in my own writing? So what I want you guys to do is I want you to look at your writing and ask yourself, do I have a claim or a thesis? Do I have a hook? Did I use precise words? And did I list the reasons I will develop later? Okay, so what I want you to do, go ahead and look at your text right now. And I want you to tell me which of these 4 things you know you do not have. Go ahead and look at that now. And in most of these cases where they're like analyzing their text, this is a hard part. So really it's more like they probably could use work in any of these areas. So it almost doesn't really matter which one they choose, you know? So you don't have to give them a ton of time here. Let me turn the volume
Which of
back
these
on.
4 areas
You don't have to give them a
think
ton
you
of
need to
time,
work
just
on?
encourage them to choose an area.
I think
Sure.
I need to work on my thesis statement because my claim is like, it's not precise in my words and my reasons aren't 100% done.
I love
Okay,
that. They're
great.
not 100%
Okay, Ashley, how about you?
done.
Well, I'd say 1 claim or thesis.
Okay, so you're gonna work on your claim or your thesis. Okay, and then Valentina, how about you? Which one of these 4 do you want to work on?
Using precise words.
Okay, and I'm gonna keep this page right here up on the screen because I want you, and you can also open it from your digital notebook, but I want you to come back to this. I want you to be able to go back and forth between Zoom and look at this and say, and keep asking yourself that question, like, how could I do it like this author did it? You
Okay, so like right there, the reason why I'm telling them like to go back and forth, they can open another mentor text, like in another tab, but it's not going to have all the marks on it that we did. And like right now, I'm not going to in this moment, like take a picture of what I just did, upload it to Google Classroom. That's like a lot, you know? So it was easier to just say, go back and forth. Now I know with iPads, that's obviously a lot more complicated. I mean, it's really not. They just double click the round button and go to it, but it's complicated for K through 2. So, I would probably do this in a different way. I would probably like with K through 2, I would expect that they're doing it on paper and they would just read to me what they wrote and then I would be sharing this screen. So they would stay in Zoom. They wouldn't leave Zoom or Google Meet. K through 2
can begin. In fact, you can begin working now even.
And then now
Okay,
at this
Allison,
point, this is
so,
where I'm going to start meeting
So
with
you
the
wanted
kids
to
one at a
work
time.
on your thesis statement. So can you read to me your thesis? Yeah, your thesis statement.
So this is what they had
There
already
are
done
many
with their
opinions and
teacher.
reasons that chocolate milk should or shouldn't be served in schools. I will give you a couple of reasons that chocolate milk should be allowed in schools and persuade you to think that chocolate milk should be allowed in schools. Chocolate milk provides nutrients. A child would choose chocolate milk over white milk. Chocolate milk has the same 9 essential nutrients as white milk.
So go back to Zoom and I want you to look at the thesis statement. It says,
You have football at recess because it's good exercise. Football at recess
This is where the
because
internet gets
it's
really
good
good.
exercise. Because everyone can play and because
can you try with your topic, setting up your thesis statement sort of like that?
We should have chocolate milk at schools because it tastes good, it's healthy, and it has the nutrients to keep you healthy.
So that was like a great way of just like
Okay,
she took
so Valentina, I'm
the
looking at
actual
your paper
example
right
and applied
now.
it to hers.
Can you go ahead and read your paragraph to me?
I was very pleased with
We
that.
wanted a sweet drink in school. Creamy, sweet, chocolatey, but healthy, and not a lot of sugar. These are just a few words to describe chocolate milk. Today I'm going to teach you why chocolate milk is still in schools. This will be some of the pros of chocolate milk.
Perfect. Okay, so let's look at the thesis, okay, from the mentor text.
So I'm going through that
Can you
same
go back
process
to
with
Zoom
her.
real
Let's
quick?
go
Can
back
you
and
read
look
this
at
for
this
me?
one, at the mentor text.
We should have football at recess because it's good exercise, because everyone can play, and because it will help us learn important things.
Good. Okay. So now let's think about what this could sound like if we wanted to do this with chocolate milk.
So
Okay, we should have chocolate milk in school cafeterias because
so at this
it
point,
has
she
all
had
the
already
nutrients.
been working
It's
on it when
soft
she was
and
with
bad.
when
It
I was
doesn't
working
have
with
a
the
lot
other
of
students. So she was
sugar,
kind of like ready
and
for it.
it does not do damage to hygiene.
So hygiene is more like if you
Taking
keep clean, right? Like if you brush your teeth or if you wash your hair, if you wash your body, that's hygiene. So let's think of a more precise word that we could use. So it's like giving them better teeth, it's giving them shinier hair. So it's keeping their bodies what?
healthy.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, let's change that last reason to say that. Okay. All right, you guys, go ahead and come on back to Zoom. Okay, so today what we worked on, just kind of as a reminder, was we took one part of the checklist and we looked at it and we said, what is it that I really need to do in this one part? And then we looked at a mentor text and we said, what is this author doing that I could try? And did you see how it made it so much easier when you were able to look at an example and then it was like, oh, I could do that. I can borrow that the way that author did it, and I can do it like that, but with my topic. And that's okay. You can do that. In fact, that's a really smart thing to do. So what I want you guys to do is I want you to keep working on your introduction, your lead, okay? We looked at the thesis and we redid the thesis, or we used our mentor text to revise our thesis. But now I want you to think about, how can I revise my hook? What did this author do that I can try? How can I use really precise words? What did this author do that I can try? Okay, and I want you to your only assignment right now is to just revise your lead. That's it, just your introduction, okay? All right, you guys, you did a really good job. Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Okay, so that was an example of a 5th grade group. So you kind of could see how it would play out. And, you know, again, it wasn't like it was perfect, but they definitely got something out of it. Okay, so I'm gonna.
So today I brought you.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so how are we doing? The 2nd grade one isn't as long because I don't show the coaching portion on it. Are we okay to watch a primary one now? Okay, so here we go. So 2nd grade, this is Miss Patton's kids.
Today I was looking.
It starts off a little more exciting.
At your
Lots of noise and
writings.
moving
Your
around.
teacher shared with me your writings, and I was thinking that's an area that we could all kind of work on, is making the beginning of our stories a little bit more interesting. So we have this really cool tool, just like when you build something, maybe you've seen your mom or your dad build something before and they use tools. we have a really cool tool that's going to help us be better writers. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read to you what this says that really good writers do at the beginning of their story. And then let's see what that would look like. Okay, are you ready? If you're ready, give me a thumbs up. Okay, so here
Thanks,
we go.
Miss
So
Patton.
listen carefully.
She's like, thumbs up.
So right here, this is where we are. Okay, here we go. I thought about how to write a good beginning and choose a way to start my story.
Can you guys hear it okay?
I chose the action,
Yes.
talk, or
Yes,
setting
yes.
that would
Okay,
make
great.
a good beginning. Okay, so can you guys help me kind of understand that? I don't know if I completely understood that, so I need your help. So what is something you might do at the beginning of a story?
Ooh.
What is something? Michelle, what do you think?
Think about what you're gonna write.
Okay, so think about what you're going to write. So that's kind of like here how I thought about how to write a good beginning, right? Yes? Okay, what else? Isabella, what's something that an author would add to the beginning of their story? I see 3 things there.
They would add some details, and they would think how they would make their story, and they would write some information.
Okay. Okay. Let's read right here. I chose the action, talk, or setting that would make begin. What could that be? So there's 3 things that they said there that their begin were they.
You could make your character move.
Okay, we could make our character move. I'm going to choose a different color to highlight that. So that's like, oh, that was too dark. Too dark. Let's try a lighter color so you can actually see it. Okay, so you're telling me the action, right? The action. So we could make our character do something or move. So characters could move. Okay, what else does it say that we could add to that story? They could move or do something. What else could our characters maybe do? Could they talk?
Yes.
Could we have them talk?
Yes.
Okay, so we could have them talk. Or we could describe the setting. What is the setting? Let's see. Can you, Samuel, can you tell me what is the setting? Do you know what that is?
The place they are.
Yes. Place where they are. Good. Perfect. Okay. So now what we're going to do is, can I share with you something that I wrote?
Yes.
You want to read something that Mrs. Ramirez wrote?
Yes.
Okay, and this is what I want us to do. I want us to look at it, and I want us to see, do we see on there that Mrs. Ramirez is showing
Why am I
how
referring to myself in the
characters
first person, in the
did
third person?
something, or maybe something that characters said, or maybe I described the setting. So let's see what I did. Are you ready?
Yes.
Here we go. It was the first day of school. I walked Sarah to school. I was excited because it was her first day. It was warm, sunny day, and I was wearing my new sandals. We turned the corner, and then we saw a dog. It was a big, hairy dog. I thought it was a nice dog, but then it growled, grrr. I was scared. Okay, all right, you guys. So let's go back and let's think. What were the 3 things that we can do when we start a story? We could start the story with how a character does something or how a character says something. Or what was the last one? Adrian, what was the last one? What a character does, what a character says, and what was the last one? The describing the
where the setting took place.
where the setting took place. Okay, so let's go back to my story. We're gonna start by looking for somewhere that someone says something. I thought it was a nice dog, but then it growled. Grrr, I was scared. Okay, guys, was there anywhere in there where a character talked?
Yes.
Where?
I thought it was a nice dog, but then it growled. Grr! I was scared.
Here he's better than me.
So even though it's a dog, he's still talking, right? So you can see where I added my character talking, right? All right. Okay, now, so character talking, character doing something. Let's go back. Can you guys look at my writing here? Where does it talk about where the character did something? Michelle, can you tell me, did I include any action in there where my characters did something?
Yes.
Tell me where so I can highlight it.
When you thought the dog was nice, but he was not nice.
He was not nice, but what part is that? I thought it was a nice dog, but then it growled. Is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
What's the action there?
You were scared.
I was scared. Okay, but is that an action or is that a feeling? Yeah, so you're talking about something that we didn't talk about. It's something that you're right, that is also important to add. Okay, but what about an action? Where do you see an action, Michelle?
Growled.
Yeah, growled. Good. Okay, so that's a really interesting action. Can you like picture it in your head? Okay, let's Isabella S. Can you unmute, sweetie? So Isabella S., can you tell me another place where there's an action? Maybe like something that I did? Not the dog, but either me or Sarah.
Where you wrote you and Sarah were like walking.
Yes, great job, Mija. So we were walking to school, right? That was an action. Let's look at that paragraph again. I'm going to read the last part and you tell me if you see setting in there. Here we go. It was a warm, sunny day. I was wearing my new sandals. We turned the corner and then we saw a dog. Do you see setting in there where it talks about where this is happening?
In a corner?
Okay, we turned the corner. Okay. What did you guys think about my writing? Do you like my story?
Yes.
Yes? Well, guess what? I read your guys' stories and I really liked where some of those stories were going and what the ideas that you guys were thinking about. But here's what we're going to do right now. We're going to take like 5 minutes and you're going to pull out your story. And I want you to ask yourself, what did Mrs. Ramirez do in her story that I could do in my story? Now, that doesn't mean you're going to write about a dog, about a mean dog. You're not going to write your story just like mine. You're just going to take some of my ideas. You can borrow them, okay? It's not stealing them. You can borrow them. So I did 3 things. I added a character, what the character was doing, what the character was saying, and I added about setting. Do you think that you guys can do that? Can you choose one of those to try in your writing? What do you think? Can you try that?
Yes.
Okay, so do you have your writings in front of you?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and I want you to read your writing to
The
yourself.
one little girl's
And then
like
I
in
want
her
you to
bed
start
under her
acting.
covers.
And
I don't think there's gonna be a
I'm
lot of
just
writing
need to
going
do
on
you guys
there.
one at a time while you're writing, okay? So Adrian, I'm gonna start with you, okay, buddy?
Okay.
And then unfortunately, we didn't get the next part because we
So
went into
you're
a
gonna
breakout
keep working
room
on your
and
story, and I
anyways.
just want you to remember that the 3
Katie was the host, so it recorded Katie staying in the room with the kids and not the me coaching the kid in the breakout room. So you don't get to see that part, but you can see
things
the
we're
end.
thinking about adding are action, talk, or setting, okay? So work on that, and the next time we meet, we'll take a look at what you've done. Sound good? Okay, bye you guys.
Little boy's like his hand up. I have a question still. Okay, so I wish that I could have showed you the coaching part, but obviously when they're doing it on paper, it's going to look a little different because I can't like open up their document to see it. It's more going to look like they're reading it to you, and then you're screen sharing your text, whether it's the annotated mentor text or whether it's your own teacher writing, and you're just continuing to bring the kids back to that mentor text. So where do you think you could add a character talking? Like, where could a character talk there? So it's the same idea where they're borrowing from another author. It's just that you're doing it at a primary level. You're doing it in a way that is relatable to them. Okay, so let me go ahead and make this big again. And so today all right, so a few tech considerations, like what are some things that you need to think about prior to attempting a small group like this? So the first is you want to make sure that you have access to your students' writing prior to the small group. Like you don't want to be sitting there saying, okay, you guys, can you share the document with me? Because all of that's just going to eat up your time, and then you're going to feel frustrated. And so you'll want to somehow, some way make sure, I mean, if it's in Google Classroom, you automatically have access to their document as long as you made it an assignment. If you're a primary teacher, you might just want to like send a message home to parents, when your child has small group, make sure they have their notebook with them. Or whatever way. And of course, I know that it's not perfect. It doesn't always work, but to the best of you can, you want to try to have access to the writing prior to the small group. Then you want to think about how you're going to display your work with the mentor text. So are you going to use an Elmo? Like, do you have a printer? Can you print off the text and then do it under the Elmo? Are you going to have different color highlighters? Are you going to skip that part? Or do you want to do it on a Jamboard? The nice thing about the Jamboard is that the kids could actually do the highlighting on there. So they could help to identify it versus the teacher having the pen the whole time. That was a little too much for me to like, if I was going to record it, I wanted a little more control than that. So I did it like more Elmo style. And then the last option would be, and I'm sure there's other options as well, but like doing it on Google Slides and instead of handwriting it using text boxes or that type of thing. Then the next thing you want to think about is, and this is just sort of like a plan B, and I actually wanted to just share this regardless of these groups, is if there is one thing that is worth its money or worth its weight in gold, it is teaching your kids to share their screen. Whether they're on an iPad, whether they're on a Chromebook, this is day one back to school night, teach your kids to share the screen. The stress that you will save yourself throughout the year is well worth its weight in gold. So one way that I might do this, because it's one thing for them to share, to know how to share their screen. It's another thing for them to be able to do it quickly. So one thing that I might do is play around the world every day. Okay, we're going to play around the world. Remember how we do that with math facts? Do that with who can share their screen first. And you have people go against each other, 2 and 2. And then the winner plays the next person. Turn it into a game. Kids love competition, right? Can't share the screen to save their lives when you want to see their writing work, but there's a little competition. They are fast. So, get the kids to the point where sharing their screen is just like natural. Some of us teachers need to get to that point too, because we're not in the habit of doing it, and practice makes perfect. And do it daily, even if you have GoGuardian. Like, even for my upper grade teachers, you're like, I can see, I don't really need them to share their screen. Do it anyways, because if you ever want it to get to the point where you can say, go into a breakout room and share your screen, they need to be practicing it in other times. And then the next thing is think about how you're going to get your students a copy of the text that you just marked up. So like that particular one that I highlighted all over, that's going to be more meaningful to them than the one even that's in the digital toolkit, right? So how am I going to get a copy to them? Am I going to put it in Google Classroom? Am I going to put it in Seesaw? Where am I going to put it so that they have a copy of the one that we did together? And also think about if at a later point and I know this is really hopeful thinking that you would get back to that same group of kids in the unit for writing during a small group in distance learning. You're probably never going to see them again during that unit. But let's say if you did, it would be super beneficial to use that same mentor text, like write the kid's name on the top, keep it in a file. And when you pull that group again, use the same one so that they can see that you're continuing the work on the same one. Okay. Now, that is it for today. I was hoping to end a little early to talk about thin slicing, but it didn't happen. It's 1:26. So just in these last 4 minutes, as always, if Edgardo, if you wouldn't mind putting the link in the chat. I always listen to the feedback. I always go back and look at it. I always tell you guys that. And to prove it, one of the teachers at the last training, she said it very sweet. She was very kind, but she said, I would love to see an example of a video that, because you remember how like I was showing the videos with Sophia, with my daughter, and that's kind of like an ideal situation because it's one kid. So she was like, I'd love to see a video with a group of kids. She was very nice about it. I'm actually looking at her right now. She's on the screen. But and so I listened, and you didn't see Sophia this time. Not that she didn't want to see Sophia, but she wanted a couple more kids in there. And so your feedback matters. I appreciate you giving that feedback. I'll stick around if there's any questions, but otherwise, you guys, I hope you have a really great week. I hope you are hoping that the Kansas City Chiefs win the Super Bowl this weekend. I will be don't text me, don't call me, nothing on Sunday, because I'll be a complete stress case. I'm a little bit obsessed. So, but I hope you guys have a great week.